You lied to me for 20 years. Those were the first words I said when she opened the front door. Not hello. Not how have you been. Just 6 words that had been trapped in my chest for what felt like an entire lifetime. She stared at me without blinking. Her face turned pale. Then her eyes drifted toward the young woman standing in the hallway behind her. A young woman with my eyes, my smile, my father's chin, the daughter I never knew existed. My name is Arthur Vale. I'm 45 years old, and until a few years ago I believed there were only 2 kinds of pain in life. The pain you expect, and the pain that surprises you. I was wrong. There's a third kind. The pain of realizing someone stole an entire future from you. One day at a time. For 20 years. If you're listening to this because you enjoy stories about betrayal, revenge, family secrets, and impossible choices, trust me, you couldn't invent what happened to me. Because if somebody had pitched this story to Hollywood, producers would have laughed and said it was too unrealistic. I wish it had been. 22 years earlier, I was 23, broke, working construction in northern Colorado. I had one pickup truck that barely started every morning, a rented apartment with mismatched furniture, and exactly $83 in my checking account. Life wasn't glamorous, but I was happy. I had friends, a steady job, plans, and then I met Emily. She walked into a roadside diner carrying 3 textbooks and a coffee she immediately spilled all over herself. Everyone looked. She laughed. Not embarrassed. Not angry. She simply laughed. That was the first thing I loved about her. She never seemed afraid of looking foolish. I walked over with a stack of napkins. You okay? She smiled. I've definitely had better entrances. I don't know, I replied. I've seen worse. She grinned. You're lying. I absolutely am. She laughed again. That laugh. Some people fake happiness. Emily radiated it. Or at least, that's what I believed. We started dating within a month. Everything happened fast. She was studying marketing. I was working 60-hour weeks. We spent every evening together. Cheap pizza, late-night drives, watching thunderstorms from the hood of my truck, talking about dreams. She wanted to travel. I wanted to own my own business someday. Neither of us had much money. But when you're young, money doesn't feel as important. Potential does. After about a year together, we moved into a small apartment. 700 square feet. Thin walls. Neighbors who argued every Thursday night. A refrigerator that buzzed louder than the television. To anyone else, it would have looked ordinary. To us, felt like a castle. We bought furniture from garage sales. Painted the bedroom ourselves. Argued over where to put the couch. Laughed when it didn't fit through the hallway. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Then things began changing. Slowly, almost too slowly to notice. Emily became distracted. She started taking phone calls outside, smiling at messages she'd never explain. Working late, canceling dinner, sleeping facing the other direction. Nothing dramatic, just tiny cracks. And here's the dangerous thing about love. When you trust someone, your brain becomes incredibly talented at explaining away things that don't make sense. She's just stressed. She's tired. School is overwhelming. Work is difficult. You become your partner's defense attorney, even when nobody asked you to. One Friday evening, I came home early. The construction site shut down because of heavy rain. I walked into the apartment expecting to surprise her. Instead, I heard laughter, a man's laughter, coming from the bedroom. I froze. For a second, I honestly wondered if maybe the television was on. Then I heard Emily, laughing too, quietly, comfortably, the kind of laugh you only make around someone you've known for a while. I walked down the hallway. Every step felt heavier than the last. The bedroom door wasn't completely closed. It was open, maybe 2 inches. Pushed it. Inside stood Emily, fully dressed, and another man, also fully dressed. The relief lasted exactly half a second. until I saw how close they were standing. Too close. He stepped backward immediately. Emily looked like she'd seen a ghost. Arthur. I looked at him. He couldn't have been older than 30. Nice clothes. Expensive watch. Perfect haircut. Definitely not one of my construction buddies. He reached out. I'm Jason. I ignored his hand. Emily quickly spoke. It's not what you think. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I'd heard those exact words in movies 100 times. And somehow, real life was even more pathetic. What do I think? I asked calmly. She hesitated. We were talking. In our bedroom? Silence. Jason cleared his throat. I should leave. Yeah, I said. I think that's the smartest thing you've said all day. He walked out without another word. Emily started crying. Immediately, like someone had flipped a switch. I can explain. Then explain. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. It's complicated. No. I shook my head. It's actually very simple. I picked up my truck keys. She grabbed my arm. Arthur, please. How long? She didn't answer. How long? Her silence gave me the answer. Long enough. I slept in my truck that night. Not because I had nowhere else to go. Because I couldn't stand the idea of sleeping in the apartment we'd built together. Around 3 in the morning, she called. 7 times. I ignored everyone. Then came the voicemail. Arthur, please come home. We can fix this. Fix it. Amazing word. People use it for broken pipes, broken engines, broken phones, not broken trust. Over the next week, we talked. Or rather, she talked. I listened. Jason had been a client where she interned. He made her feel seen. He understood her ambitions. He listened. He appreciated her. All the usual explanations people give when they don't want to admit the truth. Eventually, she said she wasn't sure she loved me anymore. That sentence hurt far more than discovering another man. Because affairs can end. Love, when it's gone, that's something else entirely. So we separated. No screaming. No lawyers. No dramatic fights. She packed her things. Left. And that was it. Or so I believed. About 3 weeks later, she called. I need to tell you something. What? I'm pregnant. Everything inside me stopped. I sat down without realizing it. What? I'm pregnant. My heart started racing. Is it mine? Silence. Long silence. Then, I don't know. Those 4 words changed everything. Think about that. Imagine hearing the woman you loved tell you she was carrying a child, but she couldn't tell you who the father was. Your entire future suddenly becomes a coin toss. Heads, you're becoming a father. Tails, you're watching someone else's life unfold. Neither option lets you sleep at night. I asked when she'd found out. She'd known for over a week. She hadn't told me immediately because she was scared. I believed her. Fear makes people do strange things. What happens now? I asked. I need time. Time for what? To think. You don't need to think. If there's any chance that baby's mine. I know. No. I interrupted. You don't. Over the following month, our conversations became shorter, then less frequent, then nothing. Every call went to voicemail. Every text remained unread. Her parents claimed they hadn't heard from her. Her friends said the same thing. Even Jason, the man she'd left me for, apparently couldn't reach her. She had simply vanished. I searched everywhere. Hospitals, mutual friends, old coworkers, social media. Nothing. It was like she'd disappeared from the planet. After 3 months, I hired a private investigator. He took my money, spent 6 weeks searching, then called me into his office. I found a marriage license. What? Emily got married. My stomach dropped. To Jason. He shook his head. No. Another man. Someone I'd never heard of. A businessman from Arizona. The marriage had happened less than a month after she disappeared. Did she have the baby? I couldn't find any birth records under her name. That didn't make sense. No birth certificate. No hospital records. Nothing. The investigator leaned back. I hate saying this, but sometimes women lose pregnancies and choose to disappear from people connected to that chapter of their lives. I wanted to argue. Instead, I just nodded, because there was no proof, no evidence, only questions. So I tried to move on. I buried myself in work, started my own remodeling company, worked 7 days a week, sometimes 14 hours a day. Success came slowly, then all at once. Within 10 years, I had 15 employees, 2 trucks, commercial contracts, money I'd never imagined earning in my 20s. Everyone congratulated me, said I'd made it. Funny thing about success, people think it erases old pain. It doesn't. It simply gives you nicer places to feel lonely. Every birthday, I catch myself calculating. If the baby survived, how old would they be now? 5, 8, 11, 14. Sometimes I'd walk through a park, see a father teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle, and wonder, would I have been any good at that? Would my child have liked baseball, music, drawing? Would they laugh like Emily? Or like me? Questions. Always questions. Never answers. Then, exactly 20 years after Emily disappeared, a letter arrived. No return address. No stamp from anyone I recognized. Inside was a single photograph. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. Just a picture. A young woman, around 20 years old, standing beside a lake, smiling. At first, I didn't understand why someone had mailed it to me. Then I looked closer. The eyes, the nose, the jawline. I stood up so fast my chair crashed backward onto the floor, because it felt like I was staring into an old family photo. Not of me, of my mother. The resemblance wasn't small. It was impossible to ignore. On the back of the photograph, someone had written 7 words. She deserves to know the truth, Arthur. I read those words over and over and over again for nearly an hour. Then I noticed something I'd missed. Tiny letters in the bottom right corner. A photography studio in Phoenix, Arizona. The same city where the investigator had once found Emily's marriage record. That's when I realized someone hadn't mailed me a memory. They'd mailed me a trail. I didn't sleep that night, not even for 5 minutes. The photograph sat on my kitchen table while I walked circles around it like it was evidence in a murder investigation. Maybe it wasn't my daughter. Maybe someone was playing a cruel joke. Maybe it was a scam. I tried convincing myself of every possible explanation. None of them survived longer than a minute, because every time I looked at that young woman's face, I saw my father. Not just resemblance. Genetics. The kind that punches you in the stomach before your brain has a chance to argue. The next morning I canceled every meeting I had scheduled. My office manager thought I was sick. "I'll be back in a few days," I told her. "You sure everything's okay?" "No." That was the only honest answer I had. Phoenix was just over a 2-hour flight. The entire time I stared out the airplane window. I wasn't thinking about Emily. I wasn't even thinking about revenge. I was thinking about birthdays. 20 birthdays. 20 Christmas mornings. 21st days of school. 20 years of scraped knees. School plays. Bad report cards. Driving lessons. Graduation. Every memory a father should have. Gone. Not because I chose to miss them, because someone else chose for me. The photography studio still existed. Small storefront. Family owned. The same sign that appeared in the corner of the photo. I walked inside carrying the picture. An older woman stood behind the counter. She smiled politely. "Can I help you?" "I hope so." I placed the photograph on the counter. "I know this is a strange question. Do you remember taking this?" She adjusted her glasses, looked down, then looked again. Her expression changed. "Oh, you remember." "I do." "When?" She flipped the picture over. "We took this about 3 years ago." 3 years. "So she's local?" I can't discuss clients. I understand. I took a slow breath. I'm not asking for her address. The woman stayed silent. I'm asking because I believe. My voice cracked. I believe she may be my daughter. The woman stared at me for several seconds. I could almost see the battle happening inside her head. Business ethics versus basic humanity. Finally, she asked quietly, "What's your name?" "Arthur." "Arthur." She looked back at the photo. "Vale." I felt every muscle in my body tighten. "How do you know my last name?" She closed her eyes, almost as if she'd expected this day. "She asked about you." Everything around me became silent. "What?" "She asked if we'd ever heard of Arthur Vale." "When?" "3 years ago." "What did you tell her?" "The truth." "Which was?" "Nothing." She sighed. "We'd never heard of you." I leaned against the counter, trying to steady myself. Why would she ask? The woman hesitated, then disappeared into the back room. She returned carrying a notebook. I probably shouldn't. She opened it anyway. She booked the session herself. She pointed at the customer information. Name, Olivia Carter, 20 years old. No father listed in the emergency contact. Only her mother, Emily Carter. Carter. Not Emily's maiden name. Not Jason's name. Not mine. The surname of the businessman she'd married. So she grew up believing he was her father. The woman nodded slowly. I assume so. My hands began shaking. Not violently, just enough that I noticed. Can you tell me where she lives? I'm sorry. I understand. No. She looked genuinely upset. I legally can't. I nodded. I know. As I turned toward the door, she quietly said, "Wait." I stopped. "I can't give you her address." She glanced toward the street outside. "But," she lowered her voice, "she volunteers every Saturday." I turned back. "Where?" "The Animal Rescue Center on Lincoln Drive." Saturday. It was Thursday. 2 more days. 2 days felt longer than the previous 20 years. I rented a hotel room, spent Friday wandering Phoenix. But honestly, I don't remember much. People ask what I did that day. Couldn't tell you. I remember traffic lights, coffee, heat, the smell of asphalt. That's it. My brain had room for only one thought. Tomorrow. Saturday morning arrived. I parked half a block from the rescue center. Then, I stayed inside my rental car for almost 40 minutes. People think courage is dramatic. It isn't. Sometimes courage looks like sitting behind a steering wheel, trying to convince your own legs to move. What if she hated me? What if Emily had spent 20 years telling her I abandoned them? What if she didn't want to know me? What if she already knew and blamed me anyway? Every possible outcome ended badly. Finally, I got out. Dogs barked from inside the building. Volunteers carried bags of food. Children played with puppies. Normal life, completely unaware that mine was about to change forever. I walked inside. The smell hit immediately. Dog food, cleaning supplies, wet fur. A young man at the front desk smiled. "Looking to adopt?" "No. I'm looking for someone." "Name?" I swallowed. "Olivia." He smiled. "Back with the golden retrievers." The hallway suddenly felt a mile long. I heard laughter before I saw her. Soft, comfortable, familiar. Not because I'd heard it before, because it sounded like mine. Then I turned the corner. There she was, kneeling beside an old golden retriever, brushing his fur, talking to him like he understood every word. She looked up. Our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. For maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10. Time stopped making sense. She smiled politely. "Can I help you?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She waited. "You okay?" I realized I was staring. "I'm sorry." She laughed. "It's okay." That laugh, different from Emily's. Lower, warmer. I finally managed. "Are you Olivia?" "I am." My name is Arthur. She nodded. Nice to meet you. She extended her hand. I looked at it, then shook it. The second our hands touched, something happened. Not magic, not destiny, recognition. Her expression changed, just slightly, like she'd noticed something too. Have we met before? No. You look. She frowned. Strangely familiar. I was thinking the same thing. We stood there awkwardly, two strangers, connected by something neither of us understood. So, she smiled. Are you adopting? No. What brings you here? This was it. The moment. 20 years leading to one sentence. I couldn't say it. Not there. Not surrounded by barking dogs and families choosing puppies. Instead I said, I was hoping we could have coffee. She blinked. I'm sorry. I know how strange that sounds. A little. I have something important to tell you. She crossed her arms. You don't even know me. I know. So why would I go have coffee with a stranger? Fair question. Completely fair question. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the photograph. The one someone had mailed me. I think this belongs to you. She looked confused, then took it. I've never seen this. She flipped it over. Read the handwriting. She deserves to know the truth, Arthur. Her eyebrows pulled together. Who's Arthur? I am. Silence. What truth? I looked around. Not here. She studied my face. For a long moment. You seem terrified. I am. She looked down at the photograph again, then back at me. I get off in an hour. We met at a small coffee shop nearby. Neither of us touched our drinks. She folded her hands together. So, start talking. I had rehearsed this conversation 100 different ways. Every version disappeared the moment she sat down. I knew your mother. Her expression softened. Okay. A long time ago. From where? We lived together. She nodded slowly. You dated? Yes. Before my dad? I took a deep breath. I don't know. She frowned. What does that mean? I don't know when your mother met the man who raised you. My father. She corrected me politely. Yes. I nodded. Your father. She leaned forward. I still don't understand why we're here. Neither did I. Not anymore. There is no good way to tell someone their entire identity might be built on a lie. Every sentence sounds cruel. Every word sounds unbelievable. Finally I asked, has your mother ever talked about me? She thought. No. Never. She shook her head. I've never heard your name before today. I looked down. Of course she hadn't. Why would Emily tell her? Then Olivia said something that froze me. Can I ask you something? Anything. Did you know my biological father? My heartbeat stopped. What? She looked embarrassed. My dad. She corrected herself again. The man who raised me told me something before he died. My entire body went cold. He died. 5 years ago. I'm sorry. She nodded. He had cancer. A long silence followed. The week before he passed away. He told me he wasn't my biological father. Couldn't breathe. He said Mom wanted to tell me someday. But someday never came. She looked directly into my eyes. So, do you know who he was? I felt my throat tighten. For 20 years, I had imagined this conversation. Not once did I imagine she'd ask me first. I whispered, I think he's sitting across from you. Her coffee cup slipped from her hand. It hit the table. Coffee spilled everywhere. Neither of us even looked at it. She stared at me, without blinking, without breathing, without speaking, for what felt like an eternity. Then, very quietly, she asked one question. Can you prove it? For a moment I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, because the truth was, couldn't. Not yet. I don't have proof with me, I admitted. Only a timeline, and a lot of unanswered questions. Olivia didn't speak. She grabbed a napkin and slowly wiped the spilled coffee from the table, more out of habit than necessity. Her hands were trembling. Mine were too. Finally, she looked up. "So you're telling me my mother lied to me for 20 years? I don't know exactly what she told you, but you believe she's been hiding me." "I believe she hid both of us from each other." She leaned back in her chair. Her eyes wandered toward the cafe window. People walked by laughing, carrying groceries, living perfectly ordinary Saturdays. Meanwhile, inside that little coffee shop, two strangers were trying to figure out if they were father and daughter. "Why now?" she asked. "Why didn't you come looking for me years ago?" "I did." Her eyes met mine again. "I searched everywhere after your mother disappeared. I hired a private investigator. I contacted hospitals. I called every mutual friend we had. I even tried finding the man she left me for. You disappeared before you were even born." She frowned. "My mom told me she left Colorado because her relationship became dangerous." The word hit me harder than I expected. Dangerous. She never gave details. I slowly shook my head. I never touched her. I never threatened her. I never even raised my voice. She watched my face carefully, almost as if she were trying to catch me lying. "I don't know you," she said quietly. "I know. So I can't just believe you. I wouldn't expect you to." She took a deep breath. "If what you're saying is true, then why wouldn't she tell me? I've been asking myself that question for 20 years. I don't have an answer. Maybe she hated me. Maybe she wanted a fresh start. Maybe someone convinced her she'd be better off without me. Or maybe—" I stopped. Maybe what? Maybe she was protecting a lie that became too big to undo. Olivia stared at the photograph again. "Who sent this to you?" "I have no idea." "You think my mom did?" "I don't." "Why not? If she wanted me to find you." "She had 20 years. Olivia nodded slowly. "That's true." Neither of us noticed the waitress refilling our water glasses. She smiled politely and walked away. Neither of us touched the glasses. Our conversation had become the only thing either of us could focus on. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. "If we do a DNA test, and you're wrong, I'll apologize. And if I'm right." I didn't answer immediately, because there was no sentence big enough for that moment. "I honestly don't know." She looked at me for several seconds, then reached into her purse, pulled out her phone. "There are clinics that do expedited testing." "I know." She looked surprised. "I looked them up on the flight here. For the first time since we'd met." She smiled. A small smile. "You really came prepared." "No." I smiled back sadly. "I came hopeful." By early afternoon, we were sitting in a medical laboratory waiting room. The receptionist had clearly seen unusual situations before. She barely reacted when we explained why we were there. Forms, identification, consent signatures, cheek swabs, 10 minutes, 20 years, reduced to a cotton swab. Life has a strange sense of humor. The technician explained that expedited processing would still take a few days. 3, maybe 4. Olivia sighed. "I was hoping we'd know today." "So was I." She stood. "Well, I guess now we wait." She started walking toward the exit, then stopped. Without turning around, she asked, "Are you staying in Phoenix?" "For a few days." She nodded. "You can call me." It wasn't much, but it wasn't rejection. For someone who'd met me only 3 hours earlier, felt enormous. The next 3 days were some of the longest of my life. I tried distracting myself, visited museums, went hiking, answered work emails. None of it registered. Every vibration from my phone made my heart race. Every unknown number made me stop breathing. Nothing. On the evening of the 3rd day, my phone finally rang. "Olivia." I answered immediately. "Hello." Her voice sounded different, quieter. "Can you come over? Now? Please." She gave me an address. A small neighborhood about 20 minutes away. The drive felt like 5 hours. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Two cars. One belonged to Olivia, the other, an older silver SUV. I walked to the front door. Before I could knock, it opened. Olivia stood there. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. We got the results. My throat tightened. And she didn't answer. Instead, she stepped aside. Come in. The house was warm. Family photos covered the walls. Pictures of birthdays, school dances, graduation, vacations. A life, a beautiful, ordinary life. A life I had never been part of. Each photograph felt like another page from a book someone had forbidden me to read. Then I saw her, Emily, standing in the living room, 20 years older, more wrinkles, shorter hair, but unmistakably Emily. She looked at me exactly the same way she had on the day I confronted her years ago. Like she'd been expecting this moment and dreading it. Neither of us spoke. Olivia finally broke the silence. The test came back. She looked at me, then at Emily, then back at me. Probability of paternity. She struggled to finish the sentence. 99.9998%. I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because hearing the number made it real. 20 years of questions, ended by 6 digits after a decimal point. Emily sat down heavily on the couch. She looked exhausted, older than 45, older than grief itself. I always knew this day would come. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I looked at her. Did you? She nodded. Every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation. I wondered if someone would tell you. I felt anger rising. Not explosive anger. The cold kind. The dangerous kind. You wondered. I couldn't. You couldn't. My God, Emily. My daughter grew up believing another man was her father. Our daughter. The correction slipped out before I realized I'd said it. Emily lowered her eyes. Yes. Our daughter. Olivia looked back and forth between us. You two are talking like you've already had this conversation. We haven't, I said. Then have it. She folded her arms. Right now. I turned back toward Emily. I asked you one question 20 years ago. She knew which one. Is the baby mine? You told me. You didn't know. A tear rolled down her cheek. I lied. I know. I was terrified. No. I shook my head. You weren't terrified. You made a decision. They're not the same thing. Emily stood up. You think this was easy? I don't know. You disappeared. You married someone else. You erased me. And you think that was easy? I think it was your choice. Emily suddenly raised her voice. You think I wanted this? I think you chose it. I chose survival. The room became silent. Even Olivia looked startled. What does that mean? I asked. Emily covered her face with both hands. I never wanted to tell either of you. Tell us what? She looked toward Olivia, then at me. Finally she whispered, because none of this started with me. I frowned. What are you talking about? She inhaled slowly. The day I told Jason I was pregnant. He didn't just leave. He threatened me. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. What kind of threat? He said if I admitted the baby could be yours, he'd destroy your life. I stared at her. What? He said he knew people. He knew inspectors, police, city officials. He said your construction career would end before it even began. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you believed him? I was 24. I was pregnant. I was terrified. And then, Emily closed her eyes. He wasn't bluffing. I stared at Emily. Every instinct in me wanted to interrupt. To tell her none of it mattered anymore. To ask why she hadn't simply picked up a phone. Instead, I stayed quiet. Because after 20 years, I needed to hear every single word. Even if it hurt. Emily took a slow breath. You remember Jason as the guy in the expensive suit? I nodded. He wasn't rich. What? He wanted people to think he was. She looked toward the window. He worked for a real estate investment firm. On paper. In reality, he spent years doing favors for people with money. What kind of favors? The kind that never appeared in contracts. The room fell silent. Olivia frowned. I don't understand. Emily looked at her. When you were little, I always told you your father worked in finance. I remember. That wasn't entirely true. I crossed my arms. So after you told Jason you were pregnant, what happened? He came to my apartment the next morning. Alone? Yes. He apologized. I thought he was going to support me. She laughed bitterly. I was so naive. He asked one question. Are you sure it's Arthur's? I told him I didn't know. He smiled. The kind of smile that makes your stomach hurt. He said, then we're going to keep it that way. Emily looked down at her hands. I thought he meant until the baby was born. I thought we'd do a paternity test afterward. But then, he started showing me things. What things? Information. About you. I frowned. What information? Your unpaid truck loan. Your old speeding tickets. Your tax returns. The building permit issue your boss had the year before. I blinked. How would he know any of that? I asked the same question. And he only smiled. I told him none of that mattered. He said, you'd be surprised how easy it is to ruin someone's future before it even starts. I felt anger building inside me. Not just because of the threat. Because it suddenly explained something I'd buried years ago. The year after Emily disappeared, I'd been investigated by the city 3 separate times. Safety inspections, permit audits, anonymous complaints. Everything had eventually been cleared. But at the time, I thought I was just unlucky. Now, I wasn't so sure. Emily continued. A week later, my landlord suddenly said my lease wasn't being renewed. I lost my internship. My bank called asking about loans I'd never applied for. Olivia looked confused. What? Emily nodded. Someone had tried opening credit accounts using my information. I stared at her. You think Jason did all that? I know he did. Can you prove it? No. He never left evidence. Only consequences. So why marry someone else? I finally asked. Emily closed her eyes. I didn't. The sentence caught me off guard. What? I never wanted to marry Richard, the man who raised Olivia. He proposed because he believed he was helping us. Olivia looked stunned. I thought you loved Dad. Emily immediately looked at her. I did. I loved him. Eventually. But that's not why we married. She wiped another tear away. When Richard met me, I was pregnant. Scared. Completely alone. He knew. He knew the baby wasn't his. Olivia's eyes widened. He knew. Emily nodded. From the beginning. He asked if I wanted help. No conditions. No pressure. He simply said, a child deserves stability. I didn't know what to say. The man I'd quietly resented for 2 decades had apparently known the truth all along. Emily smiled faintly through her tears. Richard wasn't a perfect man. But he was a good one. He never tried replacing you. He just filled an empty chair. Olivia covered her mouth. You mean he knew my biological father was alive? Emily nodded. Yes. And he never told me? He wanted to. So many times. But every time, I stopped him. Olivia stood up abruptly. She began pacing across the room. So everybody knew except me? No. Emily shook her head. Not everybody. Only 3 people. Me, Richard, and Jason. I frowned. Jason stayed involved? Emily's face hardened. No. After I married Richard, Jason disappeared. I never saw him again. Not once. I looked around the room. Family photographs, school awards, vacation souvenirs, 20 years of memories. Every one of them built on a secret. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me since Arizona. Who sent me the photograph? Emily looked genuinely confused. I don't know. You didn't. No. I swear. I believed her. Not because of her words. Because of her face. For the first time that day, she looked honestly surprised. Olivia stopped pacing. If it wasn't Mom, and it wasn't you, then who knew enough to bring you here? None of us answered. Because none of us knew. The conversation lasted another 3 hours. We talked about everything. My construction business, Olivia's childhood, her college years, Richard's battle with cancer, Emily's regrets. By the time I left, it was almost midnight. Couldn't sleep. Again. Except this time, the questions were different. Not, do I have a daughter? That answer finally existed. Instead, who wanted us to find each other? The following afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Arthur Vale. Speaking. You don't know me. No. My name is Daniel. The voice sounded old. Maybe 70. I think. We need to talk. About what? About Jason. Every nerve in my body came alive. Who are you? I worked with him. Silence. 23 years ago. My grip tightened around the phone. What do you want? I've been carrying something for a very long time, and I can't do it anymore. He agreed to meet in a public park. Broad daylight. Plenty of people around. The kind of place where nobody expects dangerous conversations. Daniel arrived exactly on time. Gray hair, neatly dressed, walking with a cane. He looked like a retired accountant, not someone connected to threats and secrets. He sat beside me without shaking my hand. You look just like your father. I turned toward him. You knew my father? I knew everyone. That wasn't reassuring. For several seconds, he simply watched children playing nearby. Then he spoke. Jason wasn't nearly as important as he pretended. I've heard that before. He borrowed influence. What does that mean? He attached himself to wealthy men, powerful developers, lawyers, city officials. He'd make introductions, arrange meetings, handle problems. What kind of problems? Daniel looked at me. The kind money prefers not to remember. I felt my stomach tighten. And me? What about me? He nodded slowly. You became one of those problems. I stared at him. Why? He sighed. Because Jason became obsessed. With Emily? No. With losing. I frowned. I don't understand. Daniel looked directly into my eyes. The day Emily chose you, Jason decided he couldn't accept second place. I frowned even harder. She left me for him. Daniel slowly shook his head. No, she didn't. I froze. What? He leaned closer. Arthur. Emily never chose Jason. Everything inside me stopped. Then why did she leave with him? Daniel's answer came so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. Because someone else made sure she believed you had already moved on. I felt the blood drain from my face. What are you talking about? Daniel reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Then he placed an old, faded photograph on the bench between us. I looked down. My heart nearly stopped. It was me, standing outside my apartment, hugging another woman. Except, I had never seen that photograph before in my life. I picked up the photograph with both hands. It was definitely me. Or at least, it looked exactly like me. Same jacket. Same truck parked in the background. Same apartment building. The timestamp in the corner read, October 14th, 21 years earlier. I stared at it, then looked back at Daniel. Who is she? I don't know. I've never seen her before. I know. You know? He nodded. Because you weren't hugging her. I frowned. The picture was altered. I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because the alternative was almost impossible to believe. You're telling me someone faked photographs 20 years ago? They weren't digital edits. They didn't need to be. What do you mean? They hired someone who looked enough like you from behind. They waited until Emily was in the right place. They took the picture from a distance. They showed it to her. My mind struggled to process what he was saying. You're serious. I wish I wasn't. Daniel looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent decades carrying a secret that grew heavier every year. I wasn't supposed to know. But I did. How? I drove. You drove. I drove people. Developers. Lawyers. Businessmen. And Jason. He looked toward the pond. I heard conversations. More than I should have. People stop being careful around drivers. They assume you're invisible. So Jason staged the photo. Yes. And showed it to Emily. Yes. Why? Because he wanted her to believe that you had already replaced her. I closed my eyes. Suddenly, everything from those weeks came rushing back. Emily had become distant, confused, constantly asking strange questions. There had been one conversation, one I hadn't understood at the time. We'd been eating dinner. She'd looked unusually quiet. Then she asked, if we ever broke up, how long would it take you to date someone else? I'd laughed. What kind of question is that? I'm serious. I don't know. I've never thought about it. She kept staring at me. You'd move on eventually. Maybe. But I wouldn't be looking. She had forced a smile. Changed the subject. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, I wondered if she'd already seen the photograph. I tried warning her. Daniel's voice pulled me back. What? I called her anonymously. I told her not to believe Jason. Did she? I don't know. But a week later, she was gone. I looked down at the old photograph again. My fingerprints covered the glossy paper. 20 years. Destroyed by a lie printed on cheap photo paper. Why are you telling me this now? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket again. This time he pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with age. The seal had never been opened. He handed it to me. What's this? I was supposed to destroy it. I turned it over. My name, written in blue ink. Arthur Vale. My handwriting? No, Emily's. My heart started pounding. What is this? A letter. From Emily. To you. I looked at him in disbelief. You had this for 20 years? He nodded once. I did. Why? Because Jason paid me to make sure you never received it. The words hit harder than a punch. You accepted? I did. Silence. I was 39. My wife had cancer. I needed money. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I told myself, people break up every day. He looked at the ground. I've hated myself ever since. My hands shook as I held the envelope. I wanted to open it immediately, but I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Daniel stood up slowly. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. I know. He nodded. I've already apologized to Emily. I looked up. You've seen her. Last month. What? I mailed the photograph. Everything suddenly clicked. The anonymous picture. He nodded. I wanted the two of you to find each other before I died. You sent it. Yes. You wrote. She deserves to know the truth. I did. I stood too. I should hate you. You probably do. I don't even know what I feel. Daniel gave a sad smile. That's fair. As he turned to leave, I asked one final question. Why now? He stopped walking. Without looking back, he answered, because the doctor gave me 6 months. Then he quietly walked away. I sat on that park bench for nearly an hour, just staring at the unopened envelope. I imagined every possible sentence inside. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe an explanation. Maybe goodbye. Eventually, I slid my finger beneath the seal. The paper cracked with age. Inside was a folded letter. 3 pages. Written in Emily's handwriting. I began reading. Arthur, if you're reading this, then somehow this letter escaped the person I trusted to deliver it. I don't know if that will ever happen. Honestly, I don't think it will. But I have to write it anyway. Because if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering. The next line nearly stopped my heart. The baby is yours. No hesitation. No uncertainty. No maybe. Just 6 words. The truth. 20 years too late. I kept reading. I lied when I told you I wasn't sure. I already knew. I counted the dates over and over. I even went to my doctor. He confirmed what I already believed. You are the father. I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. Nothing could ever be enough. Tears blurred the ink. I wiped my eyes and continued. Jason showed me photographs. He convinced me you had already started another relationship. He said you laughed when he told you I was pregnant. He said you called the baby a mistake. I wanted to believe you would never say those things. But every time I doubted him, he had another photograph, another story, another lie. Eventually, I stopped knowing what was real. Couldn't breathe. Then came the sentence that shattered me completely. If I ever discover I've been wrong, I promise I'll find you, no matter how many years have passed. Because our child deserves at least one honest parent. I slowly lowered the letter. She had tried. Not enough. Far too late. But she had tried. And someone had stolen even that chance from us. My phone vibrated. Olivia. I answered. Hey, you sound different. I just learned something. What? I found a letter your mother wrote me. Silence. A letter. 20 years ago. What did it say? I looked back down at the first page. My voice cracked. It said, "She always knew I was your father." There was a long pause. Then Olivia quietly asked, "Can I read it?" I looked at the 3 fragile pages in my hands. Yes. You should. I think. It belongs to both of us. The next morning, I drove to Emily's house with the letter resting on the passenger seat. I must have looked at that envelope 50 times during the drive. Every traffic light felt like another chance to turn around. Part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted to leave the past exactly where it had been buried. But the past had already found me. There was no burying it again. Emily opened the door before I knocked. She looked at the envelope. Her face lost all color. You found it. It wasn't a question. You knew about this letter. She nodded. I wrote it the night before I left. I gave it to someone I believed I could trust. I stepped inside. You gave it to Daniel. Yes. He never mailed it. A tear rolled down her cheek. I figured that out after a few months. Why didn't you write another one? I did. What? I wrote 3. One after another. I never knew if any of them reached you. They didn't. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where, just 2 days earlier, I'd learned I had a daughter. I placed the letter between us. Emily gently ran her fingers over the old paper. I remember every word. You shouldn't have to. I know. She closed her eyes. I've repeated them in my head for 20 years. Olivia walked into the kitchen carrying 3 mugs of coffee. She looked from me to her mother. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she picked up the letter. I want to read it. Emily nodded. So do I. The room became completely silent. Only the sound of paper turning filled the air. Olivia read every line. Slowly, carefully. Halfway through, she stopped. She looked at her mother. You really believed all of this? Emily whispered. Yes. Why? Because I was scared. No. Olivia shook her head. You were manipulated. Those aren't the same thing. Emily didn't argue. When Olivia reached the last page, she folded the letter carefully. Then she stood. She walked over to me. Without saying a word, she hugged me, the first hug from my daughter. 20 years late. I closed my eyes. I didn't cry immediately. I simply stood there, trying to memorize the feeling, the weight of her arms around my shoulders, the warmth, the reality of it. Because for 20 years, I'd imagined this moment. Reality was somehow even more overwhelming. "I'm sorry," Olivia whispered. I pulled back slightly. "For what?" "For believing that you didn't exist because you didn't care." I shook my head. "You don't owe me an apology. You were a child. You believed the story you were given." She smiled sadly. "I still wish we'd had more time." "So do I." Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. We didn't try to make up for 20 years. We simply started with one day, then another, then another. We met for lunch. We talked on the phone. We learned each other's favorite foods, favorite movies, bad habits. She discovered I snored. I discovered she laughed when she was nervous. Little things. The kinds of things parents usually learn when their children are 5, not 20. One Saturday, she asked if she could visit Colorado. "I want to see where you lived." Where we were supposed to live. The wording hit me harder than she probably realized. So we went. I showed her the diner where Emily spilled coffee all over herself. It had been remodeled. Different booths. Different owner. But the front window was still there. "This is where you met Mom?" "Right over there." She smiled. "So she really was clumsy?" "Oh, unbelievably." Olivia laughed. "I inherited that." "You definitely did." Then we drove past my first apartment. The building looked smaller than I remembered. Funny how places shrink when memories grow. I pointed toward the second floor. "That was our place." She stared quietly. "You really thought I might grow up here?" "Every day." She didn't say anything for a while, then quietly asked, "Did you ever stop thinking about me?" I answered without hesitation. "Never. Not for a single birthday. Not for one Christmas. Not for one Father's Day." She looked away. I think both of us needed a moment. As the months passed, Emily and I also began talking. Not because the past disappeared. Didn't. Some wounds leave scars forever. But carrying anger every day had become exhausting. One afternoon, I finally asked her the question I'd avoided. "Do you forgive yourself?" She looked out across her backyard. "No. I don't think I ever will." "I forgive you." She turned toward me in surprise. "You do?" "I forgive the frightened 24-year-old. I paused. "I don't forgive every decision she made. But I understand why fear makes people believe impossible things." Emily nodded silently. Sometimes, understanding is the closest thing life gives you to closure. Nearly a year after finding Olivia, she invited me to dinner. "There are a few people I want you to meet." When I arrived, there was someone sitting beside her. A young man, nervous, trying very hard to make a good first impression. Olivia smiled. "Dad." It was the first time she'd ever called me that. "This is Ethan." I almost missed the introduction, because my brain had stopped at one word. Dad. Just one word. 20 years late. Worth every second of the wait. Dinner was awkward, then comfortable, then funny. Ethan admitted he'd been terrified of meeting me. "I thought you'd interrogate me." "I considered it." Everyone laughed, including me. Felt normal. The kind of normal I'd convinced myself I'd never have. A few months later, Olivia called me while I was at work. "You busy?" "Depends. I need help building something." "What?" "A bookshelf." I laughed. "You called the right person." When I arrived, the bookshelf instructions were spread across the living room floor. There were screws everywhere, boards in the wrong order, and one very frustrated daughter. "This thing is impossible." "No," I smiled. "It just wasn't designed by someone who has to assemble it." She rolled her eyes. "That sounds exactly like something you'd say." Maybe it did. Maybe she'd inherited more from me than just my eyes. By evening, the bookshelf stood perfectly against the wall. Olivia stepped back proudly. We actually did it. I looked at the crooked top shelf. It's leaning. She squinted. Oh, it is. We both burst out laughing, then left it exactly as it was. Sometimes, perfection isn't the point. About 6 months later, Daniel passed away. Before he died, his lawyer mailed me one final envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, just one sentence. Thank you for giving me a chance to leave this world a better man than I had been. I folded the note carefully. People are complicated. Some spend years making terrible choices. Some spend the little time they have left trying to undo them. Neither changes the past, but one changes how the story ends. Today, when people ask how many children I have, I don't hesitate anymore. I have one daughter. Then they usually ask, how old is she? I smile. Old enough to remind me that I still owe her 20 birthdays. We celebrate every single one together now. Not because we're trying to erase the years we lost. Nothing can erase those years. We celebrate because every birthday after the truth feels like a gift neither of us expected to receive. If there's one thing this entire story taught me, it's this. Lies don't just steal the truth. They steal time. And time is the only thing no one can ever give back. Money can be earned again. Trust can sometimes be rebuilt. Broken hearts can heal. But 20 years, once they're gone forever. So if there's someone in your life you've been avoiding, a conversation you've been postponing, or a truth you've convinced yourself is easier to hide, don't wait, because one day you may discover that the cost of a lie isn't measured in words. It's measured in years. And by then, those years may belong to someone else.